Secure the entry point for the broadcast. Get this SCR 300 dialed in for 60 minutes and down. Are you waiting for an invitation, Princess? Transmit the outgoing signal. Come on, we need to get this mic buttoned up yesterday. Get that door buttoned up. There, got it? Is it good now? Well, adjust it on the fly then. Here we go. Going live in 3, 2, 1. This is Hyperborean Radio coming at you from the front lines of the wasteland, reminding you to keep your head down and your powder dry. And as always, we're here to let you know that you are not in this alone. I am CG, and with me is the Lore Keeper, taking time off the front lines for you. Alright, greetings you godless heathens. I hope everybody's doing alright tonight. As stated in the little radio play at the start, I'm CG. With me is the Lore Keeper. How you doing today?
I'm doing alright. And some people have been asking us for a live stream, and it was a 3-day weekend, so we thought it'd be a good time to start. Well, so, what do we want to talk about? I highly doubt Labor Day is probably the best topic, so...
I don't know. We was trying to keep a light discussion, but it seems light discussions are not really something that we do. I think our light discussions weigh about 3 metric tons.
That might be a bit of an overestimate, but it's fair enough assessment. But we do have a bit of a lighter one planned for next weekend, which people, you might like, you might not. We'll keep it close to the vest until we're a bit closer. However, since we don't really have a topic, and I stumbled upon a good dash of crazy, I think it might be good enough that we should probably just start with that. So, I don't know how many people have Telegram or how many people follow COVID vaccine victims and families. But this was a comment under one of their posts, and I thought this was just a nice little dash of insanity. No, not the Nose tribe. The Almanin, Scythian, Amalekite, Phoenician, Suevi, Schwabians, ancient people groups tied to Hyperborea. Some of the Scythian Amalekite tribe were threatened by Russia to convert to one of the 3 monotheistic religions or face extermination for the murders, rakes, human blood sacrifice rituals, kidnapping, thefts. They chose Judaism, but of course did not convert at all, just said they were Jews and went about their business with much less scrutiny than Christianity or Islam would have allowed in the Middle Ages. They continued their practices secretly and blamed Jews. It was a win-win for them because the Amalekites hated the Jews since Moses and Esther, and they could blame all on the Jews. These are called the Khazarians. Also, the Knights Templar largely created the Freemasons after the nation-states of Europe had no more need for the Knights. Practices became very perverse and occult. And that was just a nice little dash of batshit crazy to start your night off with.
Yeah. The crazy's everywhere, man. You just can't get away from it. I need my groovy snacks. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. Really. And I know that there's some people out there that probably listen to us that recognize some of these words. I've actually delved into this because so many people talk about it. I'm like, well, maybe there's something there. Just combing through history, I can't find any links in history, and I'm pretty good at finding links. But what I can find is board after board after board, room after room after room of people talking about this. And what it seems like is somebody once told a good story to excuse various behavior and point a finger at somebody else, and then somebody else repeated that and then built on it, and then it was repeated again and built on again. And yeah, it's just holy crap.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a lot of other things that you find online. And this is the thing. This is why I always encourage even people that listen to us, and I assure you I do the best research I can, but I'm also someone on the internet, so I fully expect you to do your own research because, again, internet personalities.
But actual research.
Actual research. You know, go into the Wikipedia.
Don't ask Bob what he thinks about it.
Don't ask Bob what he thinks about it. Just actual research. But it sort of reminds me of how, like, a lot of the Christians will go like, you don't understand, your gods are just the Nephilim or the angels, the evil ones. It's this level of insanity that I just can't comprehend, really.
Well, and here's my question. What business does something like that have? Well, why is that even on that telegram? Why would they feel the need to put that on a telegram about COVID vaccine injuries? What? Why? What do these two things actually have to do with each other? I understand that you think that every bad thing that happens comes from these groups. But why would you put it there? All you do is, let's even pretend it's 100% correct. That they managed to find some stuff in research that I couldn't find. And I'm really good at research. So let's pretend it's 100% true. Still, the question is why why would you put it there? That serves absolutely no purpose. It doesn't really actually help anybody. All it does is just stimulate more fear, more finger pointing, and not even useful fear. It doesn't wake anybody up to anything like, oh, hey, maybe you shouldn't get this, what is it people are calling it so that they don't get kicked off YouTube? Prescribed medical procedure?
Medical procedure, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like how you can't use,
The unnamed disease?
unnamed disease or a force equalizer.
Yes. So, I have such a hard time talking on YouTube now because of the podcast. I really do suggest listening to our podcast.
We call it Uncensored for a
Yeah,
reason.
it's called Uncensored for a reason. You get, not only do you get the swears, you also get topics that we can't talk about here. And we can actually be just blunt and up front. And no, we aren't always talking about the unnamed bat bacteria.
The bat bacteria. Oh, well. But, like we said, we didn't fully have a plan for this live stream, but we'll see what we can get into. We usually end up talking about something interesting. But I think another thing that might be good to talk about, if we're getting into this kind of stuff, is we brought it up on some of the other streams, but, like, what is with, like, all of these, like, weird wackadoo subgroups that pop up in paganism? Like, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Like, occultism, yes, technically it falls in the category of paganism, but not ethnic faith. And this is part of the reason in general I try to avoid the word paganism, is it includes Satanism, it includes Taoism, it includes Shinto, Hinduism, Aztec religion. It is literally just non-Abrahamic. That is like the one qualification it requires. So, by definition. I mean, technically, yes, I understand that it just means ethnic, which that's not how anyone uses it anymore. It's like "bye" used to be "God be with ye," and then they just shortened it into, like, Middle Ages text speak, and now we say "bye."
Yeah, that was amazing when we found that out. That BYE, by, is God be with ye. Goodbye, good God be with ye. Or good. There's two different variations on it because I actually looked into it. One is the idea is that good transformed into God or God, sorry. God transitioned into good and then turned into goodbye. The other one is the idea is that it went from God be with ye to the good God be with ye. So, good God, that's Dagda. So, that, goodbye. I like it.
Yeah, it's... I think one of the reasons that I bring that up, though, is because I will run into people who want to talk about paganism, which, okay, fine, yeah, I'm usually down to do that. And then they ask me, they start talking about, like, some occult nonsense that includes, like, 17 Hindu topics and some random shit an old alchemist wrote, 600 years ago. It means nothing. Almost all occultism, from what I can tell, yes, there are some people that use it. But by and large, almost all occultism, from what I can tell, was just some old people that wrote nonsense down.
Well, it derived from literally Judaism.
Yes, like Kabbalah and all that stuff. But basically, I guess the way to put it is, from what I can tell, almost all occultism happens when people from our lands meet people from the other end of Eurasia, and usually some wackadoo. Like even that weird Pythagorean number cult that comes from him spending time with magi in fricking Central Asia. So it's always.
Well, and it's Pythagoras, the math guy, the guy that we was taught about in math class with the triangles. Yes, he was an occult leader, just completely freaking insane. Good math for as far as triangles go. Good math as far as triangles go, but they don't like to talk about his crazy pants occulty side. Where he was a straight up cult leader. Is he the guy with the don't eat fava beans or something? Because I don't know, you'll poop blast yourself into a triangle or something.
I can't keep track of all the nonsense because there's too much. But if I remember correctly, it was either an impure food or the exact opposite. Like, you know how like the one of the popular things is like in Hinduism the cows are reincarnated princes or something. I don't even know if that's legit. It just shows up in pop culture over here. But like the beans, the fava beans, were like the ancestors, and it was like a sacred plant, and it just gets weird. It's really freaking weird.
Yeah.
But it people treat these batshit crazy things like they're somehow like the guide to a higher truth, and almost always they were just written down by insane people.
Well, we do have a few people watching, it seems, so that's good. Again, I know it wasn't scheduled, and let me see. It's something that we actually haven't done in a while, but our schedule actually allowed us to do it tonight. Anyways, I hope people's been enjoying the radio shorts I've been putting out there. They aren't getting that much traction, but oh well. Been doing the Remember the Music. The last one was with Vivaldi. And I did a what are those things called? Premiere. Did a premiere, and the people that showed up and was listening live ended up voting for the next one that we're going to do is going to be Paganini, the Devil's Violinist. The original heavy metal dude. But yeah, believe it or not, the classical music, a lot of heavy metal that a lot of people like is based off from heavy metal. They use the exact same. Or yeah, it's based off from classical music. Heavy metal is based off from classical music. They use the exact same progressions. It's. I don't know why some people are like, I don't like classical music. I think it's because they haven't actually heard it. They just heard what they think it is. But yeah, the next one's going to be the Devil's Violinist, which he was pretty cool. I mean, he was pretty rock and roll. Let me see. Yep, been doing well, I think it's one actual news thing that I did, but it's just a clip because we aren't allowed to give our real opinions about such things on here.
Nope, and that's again why the Uncensored podcast. But we just had someone comment, and they pointed out that a lot of people, Agish Yalmar, I'm guessing is the Sigil of Solomon. I'm guessing that's not the helm of the.
Are we thinking of two different kinds of law?
Well, there's people that will use like I think it's called the Vegvisor, which I just looked up the Sigil of Solomon, and let's see. The 44 Seals of Solomon. Let's see. And yeah, at least one of them. Or at least one of them. Because there are a lot of these here. But my question is, how old is this book? Because when they abscond with stuff, they tend to use our stuff and then just twist the living heck out of it. Mm-hmm. So you have like the Greek zodiac, the Western zodiac as it's more commonly referred to. And a lot of like the Greek and Roman gods, they're used up the wazoo in like common occult practices, but that's just stuff from them. But it is a good point because I don't tell people not to look into this stuff. I just don't see why that becomes the entirety of it. Because you do need, like, I will study Christian stuff, and I will occasionally study Hindu stuff. And it's for one very specific reason. It's to pick the nonsense out of our own lore, because both sides have put so much crud in there, and it's something that you kind of have to pick out, and it's very useful to know where something originates.
Well, and I love stories, so I've read stories from all kinds of different people. I just don't claim it's European. I don't use it as European. The Christian Bible, they've ripped off so much imagery. The stories are debatable, I guess. But at one point, I had the Bible almost memorized because of arguing with priests in particular. Not with the normal Christians, because I would end up arguing them into the floor really quickly. And then they'd set up an argument for me with their priest, which would usually end up ending with the priest taking a swing at me and telling me to get the hell out of their church and never come back. Which is, yay me. Wasn't my intention, but my express intention, but it was mostly so I could more easily identify their bull crap. So yeah, and sometimes it's like, oh hey, this is kind of neat. It's weird, but it's kind of neat.
Well, that's like, I won't deny, like, a lot of alchemy art looks pretty cool on an album cover. I'm not gonna pretend that's not the case. But that's like
There's a lot of cool artwork to a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is the other thing is, like, some people will use these symbols and have no idea what they mean. They'll just, like, bands will use, like, old alchemy symbols, and in some cases they actually did their research. In other cases, it's just, this one looks cool, so I will use this symbol. And this is the other thing, is symbols are symbols. They're attributed meaning by people. How old that meaning is another question. And where that meaning originated is another question. You know, it's like, to use an example that won't step on too many toes, kanji. Kanji started out as literal pictograms, and then they just simplified it over time, and now they have one of the most ludicrously complicated forms of writing in existence. But it's something to actually talk about, because I've said it before on this channel that things like occultism, they're a completely different subsection of paganism compared to ethnic faith. And you can go do that if you want, but it is a different thing. It is a different beast in comparison to ethnic faith. You know, and I guess one thing that I do get irritated by is most people seem to end up getting their lore from people that, well, let me put it this way. They pick a period of history or like a subgroup of people, and then they just will take that and run off with it. You know, like a certain group in the 1940s, they'll take the occult literature from that period, and then they'll just run off with it like these people had the right idea. You know, it's like the frickin' Oralinda. Everybody gets really obsessed with that, and it's because it's Himmler's Bible, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care that somebody 100 years ago said this. I respect the Grimm brothers quite a bit, but I still know that Jacob Grimm got a crap ton wrong in his Teutonic mythology. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's right. And just because I'm critical of something doesn't mean that I don't respect the individual. That's the whole foundation of research of science, is you don't just take everyone at their word. I don't even expect people to take me at my word. But yeah, it's simply... I think a lot of people are going to ethnic faith, and they're going to ethnic faith for a reason that seems to be more akin to a subculture. It's actually one of my biggest beefs with a lot of the pagan spheres. People actually become embroiled in it like a subculture. Like,
well, a lot of times it's because they don't want to be Christian. They look around at the other Abrahamic stuff. They're like, yeah, that sucks too. A whole forms, spiritual whole forms. So then there's a few directions that you can go. Some of them end up going with the SJW religion. Others end up looking towards ethnic faith, but they try to take the easiest route, which has the most, let's just say, questionable approaches to it, and half-formed thoughts, half-formed researching. They'll grab a hold of a tiny little thing and then turn it into its whole. Yeah, it's weird. I don't quite get it myself. They'll watch a TV show and then think that's the actual story. Like, I don't know, Thor throwing thunderbolts and Loki's evil and he turns invisible and he pulls knives and blankets out of thin air to wrap around himself, which is also, yet literally taking it from movies and TV shows. So it's, I don't know, man. People are weird.
Well, one of my bits of favorite nonsense is there was somebody on some stream, but they literally were talking about Thor was depicted with red hair.
Oh, and it was one of these I'm an expert streams too.
Yeah, Thor was depicted with red hair. This is so anti-white, and I'm like, he has red hair, and red hair is a white trait. What are you, freaking an idiot?
Oh, I thought you was going to talk about the one that described. It's an expert channel. Described Loki as Thor's fucking brother.
Oh yeah, there was an actual channel that specializes in putting out mythology and describes Loki as Thor's brother.
I'm not even fucking Norse, and I know.
Well,
I'm not even Norse, and I know.
They can't hear you.
Yeah, they can.
Oh, you can? You said it that way?
Yeah, it's loud, and I'm watching the sound.
Oh, okay. But this is what it's like raw, guys. But with well, neither of us are Norse, though. Mm-hmm. I don't do Norse paganism, and nor do you. But with all of this, I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's something that bugs me is a lot of people get into it, and we even did a whole stream on this, begin at the beginning. I don't remember if that was YouTube or the podcast. But a lot of people will take paganism and they will jump straight in, and then they will just take what they were doing before and they will take the stuff that they find out and they'll just replace figures they already had. So Loki becomes the devil, Odin becomes the Yahweh figure, you know, and then the other gods just become like Odin's angels, and
Freya becomes Mary.
Friggin' Freya becomes Mary, you know.
Balder becomes Jesus.
Balder becomes Jesus. I have actually heard, with zero irony, total seriousness, from a pagan, supposed pagan, that Loki is the devil, Yahweh is Odin, and Balder is Christ. This was not as a joke. This was that these are the same figures. What? What? And yeah, I'm not going to be quiet on that.
And I'm going to look more into this symbol, because I haven't really looked into it that much. I mean, it looks cool.
The helm of all.
Yeah. I'm going to look more into it and see if I can find anything deeper on it. The only thing I can find is real from a really quick search, doing it while we're live on the radio. Is that comes from a manuscript that was written and collected in 1847. It might be older than that. I don't know. I have no idea. But I'm going to look more into it. All I know is it looks kind of cool the way that we use it. Here. Otherwise, I'm just going to talk about stuff that we're going to do.
Yeah, it's... Basically, it's something I've noticed in paganism, and we even did a stream on it. I'm not sure if we still have that one, though, since the hiatus. But there was the Puritan, the one where we talked about how a lot of pagans, quote unquote, are returning, and then they're just making this puritanical, hyper-conservative religion. It's really ridiculous. The more I think about it, the more annoying it becomes. Because they totally know what they're doing, I think, is the thing that actually irritates me the most. And then they will present it as actual paganism. It's like the Asatru Edda. I got that when I was first starting out in paganism. People directed me to the Narena Society or whatever it's called. And I got the book, and I got probably a bit into it, and I realized it was all freaking nonsense. I don't have a very high opinion of that society. Let's go with that. But
well, you was reading part of that book that they transcribed very loosely. Yeah, I'll use the official sounding words that they transcribed very loosely, and I managed to get offended, and these weren't even my tribe's particular stories. They weren't Celtic stories. Conflating gods. Inserting some that aren't even there, I think. Pulling some out. This one is the same as this one is the same as that one. Twisting the stories. Took their blind god Hod. And made him not blind anymore because it's offensive. They jacked up their own freaking stories, man. It's just not right.
Or they combined Astara with Not. And I know why they did that. It's because Astara is a West Germanic goddess. Mm-hmm. But they're trying to make it so the North Germanic, so the Icelandic tales. Because here's the thing, is even the stuff that was written down in Denmark and Sweden and stuff, these things were written using the Icelandic folklore as the basis, not the actual Scandinavian. So, yeah, you're dealing with a completely different animal there. But you have the West Germanic, which is the common, continental plus English. And they don't line up. So you have an entirely, very clearly important goddess with Astara, Iastre, whatever, that doesn't fit. So they have to fit her in somehow. So they just picked something.
Well, they're doing the same thing that makes most people angry about modern TV and movies. The visual media platform is the stories. The stories are important. I've been watching some YouTube videos when I have to force myself to stop doing things. One of the guys I watch is Critical Drinker. He's an author. He's written a few books, and then he does videos basically critiquing and talking about TV shows and movies. And then through him, I watched a couple other guys on some of their streams, and they all have the same complaint that we have. The dirty rats have forgotten how to tell a story. It's the message. They've put the message over top of the story rather than the message as part of the story. And we already disagree with most of the messages that's out there. But the storytelling. And then this Narena Society did the exact same thing. Hold on. The only thing that they didn't do was race bend. Because they did use European gods. But they did the same thing. It's crazy, man. The stories are important. Okay, what was you going to say?
I was just going to say, it's actually something that this desire for a Bible severely irritates me. Because first of all, we didn't have that. Yes, we had epics, and we had a ton of folklore.
We had thousands of stories.
We have, keep in mind that we lost a lot of them. And we still have more than you can possibly read in a lifetime.
More than you can fit in the largest building in the world.
Yeah. So when people try to narrow it down to a single book, this is just ridiculous. And it actually has gotten to the point where it's just irritating to me. Because the more I look into paganism, the more I am confused as to how so many confusing things have come about. Because, like, just like everybody else, I'm still doing research. I'm still finding stuff out. And the more I find out, the more I realize that a lot of the stuff we say is something other people have come to the conclusion of.
We say nothing new.
Yeah, we say nothing new.
Yeah, not only do we not say anything new, we actually say stuff that hasn't been said in some cases for centuries because it's been shoved to the side because it's heretical, because it's it doesn't support the narrative. These are the reasons that they is pushed to the side. But even when we say something crazy outlandish like, well, we suspect that we're descended of Neanderthal, which is descended of a bear-like creature, and the bear and us are cousins. We're related. That's not new.
No, in fact, it's ancient. It's really old folklore, which, you know, some people would chalk up to just, you know, crazy cavemen or something. Except the more we looked, the more it actually makes sense. Physiology, diet, personality. Even Darwin started arguing something like that because everyone focuses on his early work. They don't pay attention to what happened after that. You know, where convergent evolution actually became much more likely an option than divergent. Like if you ever want to see something freaky, just our young. Like if you look at like a newborn Asian baby and a newborn white baby, you know, maybe after they don't have placenta and goo on them and amniotic fluid. Couple days old. You wouldn't call them the same species. We have the same number of limbs. We have roughly the same thing. But this is basically, and this is provable because they tried to call a group of chimps that had mange, was it?
Yeah.
Mange, where they had lost their hair, a new race of man they'd discovered. This is basically all that's required. And it's not even really talking.
Early 2000s, I think it was.
Early 2000s is when that was, apparently. But basically, pretty much walks upright, more or less. Mostly hairless. Opposable thumb. That's it. That's actually it. If you think about it, that's all that's required.
Right, and, well, but you see the Asian baby and the Hyperborean baby, they look more similar than a Hyperborean and a chimpanzee. And a Hyperborean and a chimpanzee look more similar than a Hyperborean and a bear. We're not saying that we're the exact same species as a bear. Because divergent evolution isn't necessarily not a thing. It works in tandem with convergent evolution. We argue convergent evolution, which is why you end up with the man-shaped species running around the planet. This is not a new theory. It's ancient. It's actually passed through the scientific fields. It was just dropped because it didn't support the biblical stories, so on and so forth. And then they just focused on divergent evolution instead of how divergent evolution and convergent evolution actually work hand in hand. But bears, people have accidentally picked up little cub bears and thought that they had little dogs. Who confuses a dog and a bear for the same animal? And yet it's actually been done.
A lot. Or, well, that's kind of the thing, isn't it? just the right amount of limbs and a roughly similar appearance. But to continue on to other stuff, actually, a friend of mine shared this, and I'd like to just go ahead and read it. I think I sent it to your way. And this is a good point. Someone actually brought this up. I'm guessing this is on Twitter. But it recognizes what instinctively we know our home to be. Talk about what home is. Snow and spruce forest is home. From the very start is ours. Before anyone has told us that it is snow and spruce forests, it has its place in us, and then it is there the whole time. Waist-high drift around dark trees, it's here for us to mix into our own breath the whole time. Though no one sees it, we have snow and spruce forest with us. Yes, the hill under snow, and tree upon tree as far as you gaze. Wherever we are, we find ourselves facing this and having us a promise about coming home. Coming home, going out there, bending branches and feeling so it flares in you. What it is to be where you belong the whole time until it is put in our inland hearts. And that's something we always talk about. We always bring up, we always talk about. We are forest people. Temperate forest. This is our specialty. You know, the temperate and the boreal forests. Because these are just where we are most well adapted. You know, between the vellus hair, the types of body fat we get, our builds, our strength, our diet, the various hair and eye colors which we share with most northern animals. We are very clearly a forest people.
Our musculature, the type of muscle that we have, our bone density, there's even differences in the way that our skeletal system is set up and our nervous system as well. And it's not just environmental.
Well, we're also somewhat semi-aquatic, as opposed to, you know, like, for instance, the Polynesians, which are pretty much full-on aquatic, like the opposite of us, like frickin' seals. Minus the fur. They just have, like, kelp-like hair. But yeah. And, or porpoises, as they say. But,
well, actually, they say whales.
Whales? Yeah. But, yeah, we didn't fully have a topic for today. We just kind of felt like, hey, some people wanted us to do a live stream, so I decided to do one again.
Get all academic.
Oh, get all academic?
Yeah, go ahead. Geek right out for them.
Well, I can say that we did have to skip the summer issue of the magazine due to some just a lot of stuff going on. But we are coming out with one for Halloween, and it might be a twofer because we're sort of starting to do self-publishing, but we're still working with the White People's Press at the moment. But with all of these things we're doing, it's also why we haven't been doing live streams as much lately is I work full-time. In fact, I work 6 days a week. And then I come home and I do research and I work on stuff. And basically we just most of the time don't have time. Like today was a bit of an exception because we have a 3-day weekend. So that gains me, 10 hours of time that I didn't have before. But I'm not sure, what we kind of feel like talking about.
I don't know. Do they got any questions?
Oh, yeah, I know. Vilhjalmur Alifer. Did you know the reason our hands and feet get wrinkles when wet is to increase friction surface for walking on rocks? Pretty cool. Yes, and it also... That's why we say we're semi-aquatic. Other races don't really get that unless they're mixed with us. Some of them do just way later. It takes longer, and I think that one Samoan guy said their skin is just like that. It's not wrinklish, but it's like the texture's different enough that they don't have as many issues like we do. Interesting. They swell up. But yeah. Oh yeah, that's why I repeated. He's overdoing a thing. But basically, it's one of the reasons we always bring this stuff up. And it's like, I get kind of irritated when people endlessly try to talk about the modern human versus the Neanderthal versus the Cro-Magnon. there's no evidence the Cro-Magnon actually existed. And Neanderthal, increasingly, they're just classifying as modern humans.
All these genetic studies about the Cro-Magnon, they don't actually exist. They talk about them, but they've never done them because they've never gotten viable genetic material from a Cro-Magnon bone. Because it always just comes up as Neanderthal or modern white human.
I don't know if you all heard that, but pretty much they've never successfully done a DNA test on a Cro-Magnon. It always comes up, Neanderthal or modern human. And here's the thing is, Neanderthals are effectively modern humans. There is even a growing consensus, according to geneticists, and their physiology is not that different from us. Well, look at the skull comparison. Well, yeah, if you compare, a woman's skull to Eddie Hall's skull, it's going to look like two different species.
Well, shit, I was just going to say Eddie Hall's skull compared to a normal human skull.
Well, and you can actually...
He's got a massive fucking head.
Well, you can actually look this up, a giant versus a midget. One of the shortest white people to ever walk the earth and one of the tallest. And then a normal human in between them.
Got them on display together.
Yeah, they've got all three of those skeletons on display together. You would say these, if you didn't know better, you would say all three of these are different species. And here's the other thing is, scientists are terrible at reconstructing species. For all we know, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was round.
Covered in fur. It might have looked like a fucking rabbit.
It might have looked like a rabbit, because here's the thing is, if you ever seen a rabbit skeleton, well, apparently a lot of anatomy and biology and zoology experts hadn't, because they reconstructed a weird weasel thing instead of a rabbit.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's how much padding does it have? How much hair does it have? It's just irritating. And then you have,
That horror that they invented, it was a hippopotamus.
Oh, yeah, you take a hippopotamus skeleton and you end up with something out of Avatar. And not Avatar the Last Airbender, Avatar the terrible James Cameron movie everyone had a collective hysteria about when it first came out. And that's the thing, is everyone's taking these things at face value rather than actually looking into them or thinking, does this actually make sense? They're talking about that new, dragon man they found in, China. Uh-huh. But didn't they find, teeth?
Yeah.
They do that all the time. They'll find a tooth or a portion of the skull fragment or what they think is a skull fragment. Although there's been a couple skull fragments that they've had that turned out that was, crap, I can't remember off the top of my head. The scapula. Turned out to be part of a scapula. And they present the stuff as if it's fact. And most of the time for a lot of these hominins that they found a tooth or a portion of a skull, and a very small portion at that, or a bone fragment, and then they'll create an entire creature and an entire story around it.
Well, they do that with antique finds like archaeology. I have no shit seen them where they claim that 3 stick figures, actual stick figures, are the death of Balder. They have nothing to back this up. Absolutely nothing. And here's the thing is, we don't even know, the Eddas, they're from a very late period. One's a bardic textbook, the other's just collected poetry scraps. That's not invalidating them. It's just you can't take the lore completely out of its setting. I am aware that a lot of the folklore I study is from a Christianized culture, but you wouldn't know it to read most of it, actually. And it's you read Paul Bunyan lore. They don't like Christians in those stories. There's freaking magic whorehouses in them.
Yeah, the magic whorehouse.
Or the Ole the blacksmith, however it's pronounced, literally stuffs some preacher up the chimney because he won't leave him alone. That's why I get really irritated when people are like, well, that Paul Bunyan lore is just Christian nonsense. Have you ever actually read it? I mean, it's pretty much American pagan. People, or I had somebody, he tried to use something, he tried to basically call me a Sith or something.
Only Siths deal in absolutes.
Yeah, and then
a line from a movie.
a line from a movie as if it was going to win an argument. And then I pointed out to him that in the expanded lore, there is not this evil Sith and these good guy Jedi. It's not how the extended lore is set up. It is in the movies. And it gets increasingly simple, especially with the frickin'... Well, those are not canon in my head, so I don't count the... Actually, all of Star Wars now kind of sucks after how badly they ruined it.
But he took one line out of context and tried to win an argument with it.
Yes. Well, and like there's the elephant skull, the idea that that's where the Cyclops myth originated from, or the Scythian griffin standard from Triceratops myth skeleton. I doubt that, and it's mostly for a very simple reason. With the elephant, they would know what elephants looked like.
Elephants were alive at the time.
Well, not only were they alive at the time, but I think, was it Sicily or whatever?
They knew what elephants were.
They knew what elephants were, and there were still some actually in the Mediterranean. Like, there was that weird dwarf elephant. Mm-hmm. I don't remember when that went extinct, but considering that there's evidence that that specifically Hyperborean white humans have inhabited Greece for around 750,000 years, yeah, I don't really think that the Cyclops thing, and not to mention the Cyclops is a straight up god. Like everyone forgets, but
it's not a monster.
It's not a monster. I mean, it's treated as a monster because it eats people, but it's a gray area. And then you also have, what were they called? But there's like this trio of Cyclops that are freed by Zeus, and they actually make weapons for the gods. They're like the frickin' dwarves of Greek mythology before Hephaestus rolls around. I forget what they're called, though. But there's a specific subgroup of Cyclops, and then there's other ones that show up. It's a whole thing. Like, everyone, for some reason, people seem to think that, Norse mythology is unique and that there's non-humanoid gods. But no, a shit ton of the Greek monsters are actually just straight-up deities.
Non-humanoid gods are everywhere, too.
Oh, yeah. Henwin for the Welsh, the sow goddess.
Well, shoot, the bear goddess, she's everywhere.
Oh, yeah, the bear goddess, all the animal cults. The Triceratops for the griffin, maybe. That one, it's a maybe. Though I get a bit weird with the giant bird thing. For one very specific reason is birds have very light bones. It is very rare for them to actually leave a skeleton. This is actually one of the theories people throw around for dragons, is they would have had to have a light skeleton and all that other stuff.
Only if they flew.
Yeah. Only if they flew, which actually early dragons are more close to the worm.
They're called worms for a reason.
Yeah. Well, worms are called worms for a reason, but the old school dragons, dragon used to just mean monster, Grendel was a dragon. He's clearly not a dragon, but he was a dragon. It meant something else. And then you have just straight up dragon spirits, corn spirits, like Drox. It's a whole thing, but it's a plausible explanation. But it's sort of like how people will claim that they found bear skeletons, and that's why, and they look so human without the head that's where demigods come from. Except demigods are typically portrayed as human sized, maybe a little tall, and they would have known what bears looked like.
Well, and I like the things like what he brought up there with the, perhaps the Cyclops was because they found an elephant's skull, and the griffin from the Triceratops skeleton. Okay, sure. I like those mental games of what if, why not? I mean, where I start getting is when they start saying this is for definite where they got the idea of a Cyclops. This is for sure where the concept of a griffin came from. They can't know. That's the harsh reality of it. They cannot know that this is how they got the ideas for these things. And then what's another one? Somebody asked about it before. It was that statue thing. And then when we pulled it up so I could see the picture, and I didn't realize it was supposed to be a lion. It's a bear.
Oh, the Lowen Mensch. Yeah, the Lowenmensch, the lion man from Germany that people will compare to like Naha Simra or whatever it's called, the freaking avatar of Vishnu or Bastet or whatever. Yeah, it's a bear. It was found in like Bear Cult Central, and if you look at how the legs are, it's a bear standing up. And it's not anything I'm trying to like take away from people. It's just that's the far more likely, and that's an example of how academics and scholars and experts.
From a bear cult area.
It comes from the frickin' Alps, which was like Bear Cult Central. Them in the Pyrenees. It was like Bear Cult Central there. So I just really doubt the lion thing, especially because, as far as I can tell, lions pre-Christianity, we didn't hold a lot of significance to them spiritually. I might be wrong, but like lions didn't even die out until like lions in Europe didn't die out until like fairly recently, just the last couple thousand years. Like maybe in the last, not even the last 2,000, but yeah, they were still there. So it wasn't like they weren't there to be.
That's a lion, but it's definitely not related to anything Egyptian or whatever. I think that's where they.
No. Oh frick, what is it called? It was that stupid lion avatar of Vishnu. Yeah, it's Narasimha, which, yeah, that was the one that I told you about that had such a stupid story to it, with like the whole can't be human, can't be animal. No, it's.
Well, and the bear that I put the gif of, bears don't typically walk with their arms up like that. This one here in particular has injured paws, which is why it's walking that way. Usually they'll walk with their paws down to the side. I'm going to see if I can find a good example so that people can see how bears actually tend to walk on their hind legs. And they can do it for miles. This one here in particular, that's almost exclusively how it gets around. But bears can walk around on their hind legs almost as good as we can. Here.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I always try to bring up. Part of it is honestly because the bear cult is important to me spiritually. On the other hand, it was important to our ancestors immensely, and there were other things. There was wolf cults, and there were boar cults, but the bear cult thing is really freaking old. Like, I think the oldest inscription in Europe supposedly says something about the bear goddess and the bird goddess. So that's one of those things. And like giant birds, I don't ever actually really take that off the possibility. I don't even deny the possibility that like thunderbirds might still exist.
Which one do you think is better, this one or the one where he's walking beside the bus?
That one. And I think one thing to really kind of convey, I guess, is whenever you read something, whenever you see something, whenever you hear this grand new discovery, actually try to, like, I'll look up archaeology, but I almost always try to look up an actual image of it. And then compare that to what they're saying about it. Look up the details of where they found it. Was there anything else found with it? What kind of importance this is.
Any other way to explain it?
Yeah, is there any other way to explain it? Because here's a fun fact, is if someone said unknown stick figures on amulet discovered in northern England, how many people would give a shit? How many people would care? How many people go, neat? But now you say, Death of Balder, found inscribed on ancient amulet from pre-Roman Britain or post-Roman Britain or Saxon Britain or whatever. Now you've got people's attention. It's like people that will do videos of Odin specifically. Like, put Odin in the name, put Valhalla in the name, put Asgard in the name. Why? Because then people will click it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's clickbait. They do it all the time. That's why news articles are written the way that they are. Educational stuff is written the way that it is. It's literally clickbait, and it works. It works. It doesn't even have to be true. The thing that you say, Doesn't even have to have anything at all to do with the title, and it works. That's why they do it. And then the more people that click it, the more famous they get, the more money that they make. So they aren't, and this isn't all archaeologists. This isn't all scientists, because archaeologists and scientists are actually fighting back against this nonsense. Linguists are actually fighting back against the same nonsense that we fight with the Indo-European crap. There's actual linguists fighting back against it. But the ones that get all the attention are the ones that give all the clickbait.
Well, it's like people that go on about this Indo-European crud. It's not only unproven, it is largely disproven. You know, saying this word and this word from a massive language sounds somewhat the same is not an argument. And then if the languages are connected, let's roll with that maybe. What the fuck does that have to do with the mythology? What do you name a god of thunder? A word that means thunder. I mean, Thor is literally just the sound thunder makes if you pronounce it correctly.
Well, and there's been groups that's taken it further where they've actually linked all the languages on Earth together because it proves the Bible true.
Well, that's like somebody was trying to argue with me that, like, the Finnish mythology is part of the Indo-European stuff. And he had he threw up some words that, kind of made it make sense. Here's the problem with that. Finnish is one of the few groups of European stuff that is almost never included in, is never been included in the Indo-European. Them and the Basque and like the Hungarians are almost always left out. The Finno-Ugric groups and the Basque. However, but he just disproved it. If you can connect,
the best they managed to prove was that Finnish is a European language.
Yeah. If you can connect, supposedly you can connect any language to any language, and he proved it, which makes this whole connection thing just absolutely insane. Like, if you can take Finnish words and the Finnish language, the most distinct, hardest to learn, and most unconnected language on the planet, you've just proven that every language can be connected to any language. It means nothing. And he was too blind to see that.
And ethnogenesis, from the definition I'm seeing right here, it already exists because you can tell the difference between a Hyperborean and a Chinese Asian from a Japanese Asian. Now, when you get to the smaller ones, it gets kind of muddied, harder to tell. You can tell those apart from an African or a Mesoamerican. So that part already exists. And how does that apply to ethnic faiths? An ethnic faith describes their biospirit. And one of the... it'll lead into another argument. But, what's that called? Shit. I need you, word guy. Divergent and convergent.
Well, he's talking about an ethnic faith, not a race of man.
Okay, I just looked up ethnogenesis, and it's literally talking about races. And then he was asking how we can apply ethnic faith to it. The ethnic faith describes the biospirit of each race.
Yes, and then...
Which is exactly what I was talking about. But then that's going to lead into another argument, convergent evolution.
Yeah.
Because, well, if that's the case, we all still have the same biospirit because we all come from the exact same species, out of Africa theory, which has been disproven. However, convergent evolution is an actual thing. And that is one possible way to explain why we all have different biospirits. Not to mention, even if divergent evolution was a thing, we spend enough time separated from each other, we become distinct species.
Well, and what he's specifically asking, like, the French and the English went through an ethnogenesis and are distinct ethnic groups within the Hyperboreans.
But they're not.
Well, like an ethnic category,
Here's the thing. If I take a Hyperborean from any of our tribes, strip them down naked, plop them in another spot, and they don't say anything, they'll pass for the Hyperborean group that's there. There's really no distinct... I mean, there is kind of. We can kind of tell each other apart, but it's not really... It's not really a thing, and it's because we war and we fuck each other all the time.
Well, and if you're referring to specifically like subgroups, like tribes...
Right. That's one of the issues here, is there's so many ways to understand one comment.
So, if you're talking about tribes, like the formation of the French from like the Franks, the Romans, the Gauls and the Normans, then in America, it technically did happen. And this is the thing. While genetically, that's argumentative. Pre-Civil War, America was as distinct as any other country in America. Mm-hmm. It's just, there was a massive dieback, and then you had an immigration of a lot of Europeans to fulfill the void of just the sheer amount of dead men.
Well, and you see, this is one of... We disagree with each other sometimes.
Yeah.
And my example would be, Gauls took over Rome several times. Not just once, but several times. Romans left for Gaul. These tribes warred with other people, and people was moving all over the place. They couldn't tell just by looking at each other. How they told was the way that they spoke, the way that they behaved, and the way that they dressed.
Well, yeah, if you're talking genetically, a lot of things that you could classify genetically, like people will count French and English, it's way too complicated to fully get into there. But if you're talking specifically like a named culture that has like a distinct subgroup, like the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Cajuns, those are definitely a distinct tribal group in the United States.
Right.
They have a distinct
now,
culture.
Might be also speaking about just specifically, like what people think of as pantheons. The Celtic gods are separate from the Gaulish gods, are separate from the American gods, like Paul Bunyan and Pecos Bill. And
well, one thing I would say really quick is pantheons do not exist. As such. What most people think of as pantheons is just various local cults of gods.
There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. So when you have like a Germanic tribe, it might have all Germanic gods, but then you go, over the mountains, and that group has none of the same gods. And they're also what people would term Germanic.
Now, like you're not necessarily going to find Zeus, for instance, in Spain or in Ireland or in even Germany. So in that sense, is there a pantheon? Yes, but there is still overlap between, and it's really pronounced between the Slavs, the Germans, and the some of the southern Scandinavians, I guess. But there's a lot of overlap there. There's a lot of overlap between the Celts and the Germanics. So, yes, no, maybe so.
Well, and this is one thing that, especially like southern Germany, it was referred to as Celtic for a long time, and now everyone considers it Germanic. It's a whole thing, and it's one of the reasons...
This is one of the reasons people don't like us, is because we don't have hard and fast answers for them.
Well, most things don't have a hard and fast answer. It's like Perchta, for instance.
It's because we tell the truth.
Yeah, well, like frig. People will take frig, and they'll take a mistranslation of the words Thrigamholda, or the witch holda, and they'll take that as Frigholda, and then they'll say Frigg and Holda are the same goddess. That's a mistranslation. That's from an S that looks like an F, like the old S's. And then, from there, they try to combine her with Perchta. Perchta was likely a Celtic goddess, and most people consider her such. However, she's Alpine, and because of who currently lives in the Alps, and what most people would call the people that currently live in the Alps, she's Germanic, but she's not Germanic. And this is partly why I tend to advise people that going with the group pantheon, while it's like a good... Okay.
It's a good starting place.
Well, this is how I'd put it. And it's a terrible analogy, but it's the best I can do. If any of you have ever played like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or any of those trading... Excuse me.
Slow down. I'm not going to take the mic.
Okay. Sorry, I was talking too fast there. If anyone's ever collected like trading card games or whatever, where you actually like, you usually get like a starter deck with like basic cards. And then from there you mix it up and make it your own. And
That's what most of our tribes do.
yeah, you have, like, when you're first getting into, like when I first was getting into paganism, the easiest and most accessible things to get my hands on were the Eddas, because everybody talks about them. They're easy enough to find at a bookstore. So I got a couple. I got the Poetic Edda and I got the Prose Edda. And from there, a few years later, I'm here and I don't really touch the Norse stuff aside from research for articles and stuff. But in general, the Norse stuff doesn't interest me that much anymore. And it's not a disservice to the Norse. It's, I'm not Norse. I'm very clearly Alpine. But that's how, it's a good place to start. Like, if you're first getting into it, I don't vilify people for going off of, the mainline Celtic sources. I don't vilify people for going off the mainline Germanic sources or even staying there. But then people have to actually show that they're willing to put the work in, or at the very least, aren't trying.
That's all that there is?
That's the thing. I don't know if you guys can hear him. He's a little far away. But if you tell people that this small group of stories and information is all there is because you didn't bother to look further, that's when I have an issue. When I talk to people that said they read every story they could possibly get their hands on for their people. And I used to be naive enough to believe them. I'm not anymore. Because I talked to that person and eventually realized I'm not even sure if he's read the frickin' Eddas. Which,
when he's quoting them wrong.
When he's quoting them wrong, or, and this is one thing that also irritates me, is every person, every god with a beard and a staff is not Odin. They're also not all Wotan. They're also not all Rubizal. They're
definitely not all Zeus.
Well, here's the basic thing. Old. Male, traveling, stick, and beard. It's that simple. It doesn't require complications. What do you represent, a god of traveling as, or a god of this or that? Probably somewhat akin to the people that probably do said thing.
And if he knows a thing or two, he's probably older.
Yeah, if he's wise and well learned and has life experience, he's probably depicted older. And man, I really wish paganism was simpler, but it's not. And pretending it is to make it's as complicated as life, but it's also as simple as life. And that's kind of the thing. That's
why the view matters.
Yeah, the view does matter. Like, for instance, if you go into let's say that you are Scandinavian. I got some bad news for you. Well, it's not bad news, but a lot of people probably aren't going to be happy about hearing it. Odin wasn't actually that popular there. It was an aristocratic god. Why is there a lot of references to him? Because who wrote down most of the stuff? And then, why are there temples to him? Or temples that involve him? Because who built them? Who had the money to build them? It's the same reason that organs are in mostly churches. Who has the money to build these things? The average person was not a big Odin fan. And now people, because they need this sky papa. And that's actually getting back into the Indo-European thing, is this whole... People will basically combine all these different pantheons into a simplified set of, 12 frickin' gods? 5? I don't even know. But the fricking...
They try to bring them down to 3.
Well, they actually try to bring them down to 1. Because everybody that goes down to, well, we can ignore all of the mythology that our people have and just focus on this reconstructed mythology of the Indo-Europeans, which didn't exist, doesn't exist, and the language is made up. You may as well venerate the Dothraki. I have never heard a single one of them mention anything other than their precious Sky Father. Does this not seem like it's an obvious attempt to get everyone to go back to worshiping Sky Daddy in church with the bishops and the priests.
Well, and one thing that I've heard, and then I gotta walk away again for a minute, but one of the things I've heard people use to defend this way of thinking is, our people need a singular story. No, this is incorrect. We do not need a singular story to unite all of our people. This has been tried, and then people will understand this singular story in many different ways. If you don't believe me, look through our history and just look at Christianity. How many different forms of Christianity is there? There's one story. What we need is a singular worldview that is good for our people. Good for our people. And 100,000 stories to inspire the imagination and the hearts of our people around that one view. That is closer to what we need than a singular story.
And even that's oversimplifying.
Yes. Everything has to be oversimplified.
Yeah, well, that's why we use examples of extremes. Like, why do I keep tearing into the Indo-European thing? Because there's no proof of it, and people are literally so freaking lazy that they will go straight into it and then leave the other end a monotheist again. Because Sky Papa, everybody. That's what it's for. I mean, it's literally... This is why, like, if you actually look into Indo-European, depending on who you read, this word connects to this word, this god connects to this god, this god connects to this god. Sometimes they include the Celts, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they include the Hebrews, sometimes they don't. It depends on what they want to do. Who do they want to leave out of their special super club? It's all just nonsense. And because nobody has the faintest clue of what they're talking about, they can just make up whatever they want. You'd be further off at that point just venerating the frickin' Lord of the Rings books.
Well, and this kind of brings me to what I want to talk about on our podcast, potentially this week, but coming up on the Uncensored podcast is the downfall of empires and civilizations. It always revolves around experts. Every time. It's a consistent thing, is the experts get their hands in there and people just listen to the experts. And every time they will say the same thing. But the experts agree. Here's the real truth of it. Experts never agree.
Oh, yeah. Because I've actually asked people, where is your freaking proof for this nonsense? And just listing words that sound similar don't count. And then they will then go around and then say, I'm the one debating a well-accepted scientific theory. And I'm therefore the one that needs to prove it.
The ethnogenesis that's occurring in the U.S. is the browning of our people.
Yeah, and that's not really ethnogenesis, that's ethno-death. Because, like, the frickin' Eurasians and the frickin' mulattoes, those aren't the same thing. You're not creating a new ethnicity, you're just destroying old ones. Beige power, as the Canadian ad would say. But in general, it's just a thing, people.
And what is the view to wrap ourselves around? It's getting back to what our biospirit actually is. It's getting to understand what our biospirit actually is, which is what we talk about all the time, regardless of what it is, what the particular topic is. Like, we are naive. It's part of our biospirit. We're friendly and trusting until we're not. And you might look at cities and say, well, they're not naive. They're not trusting. Really? How many people are lining up for this medical procedure because they trust the government? Because they trust the experts and are asking no questions? How many people are separating themselves into these very small units and staying locked in their houses out of fear? It's because they trust. They're naive. They aren't asking any questions. How many people will just repeat what an expert says without actually looking into the thing that the expert said? We're naive. It is part of our biospirit. We can fight this by being aware of it. So if we're aware that we're naive, we can then say, oh, well, I have a naive, open nature because it's part of our biospirit. I need to step back and assess these things on a one-by-one basis, because currently being naive is not healthy for us. In a homogenous environment, it's safer. And in some cases, you could take it to the extreme. It'd actually be beneficial. To, I don't know, imagine being in a tribe 50,000 years ago, and somebody just runs up screaming, "They're coming, they're coming." Is that really the best time to stop and question anything, or is that the best time to grab your spear, grab your bow, grab your heavy rock, whatever, and just run forward to present a defense?
Well, this is why we have stories like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Because here's the thing is, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, it's often used as just a story to say, don't lie. That's true, but they also believed him several times. And then what happened when they stopped believing him?
When they stopped being naive.
When they stopped being naive, when there was actually a wolf and it was actually eating sheep, as fairy tale wolves tend to do, they didn't come. And that's the thing, is we have to be trusting, because that's kind of how that works. But right now it's a huge liability. Or another good example is like the people used to have laws of hospitality. And there was lore around it. You never know if it's the gods showing up. There's even stories about that with the Greek gods, them going around trying to check on people. German gods, Celtic gods, the Norse gods, the Slavic gods, they do it all the freaking time. So you don't turn away someone who needs help, who knows who it might be. This is also what the temples were for. They weren't for freaking services, people. If there was a frickin' ritual, which was really popular in like Roman Greece, they would do it in the groves by the temples. The temples were by and large just for people to go and not to visit, I guess, but mostly it was for the gods if they wanted to stop by. Yeah, that was the main thing. And it's one of the reasons I fight so hard against temples, is because I know exactly what our people are going to do with it, and that's what they're doing now. Go to your Hoth, listen to the sermon on Odin, and shut the fuck up.
Right, and other parts of our biospirit, which we talk about all the time, and we're intricate, but you can see it on display in how it's taken advantage of. We want to be the good guy. We want to be the hero. Even our people that are doing the most screwed up stuff. Okay, I don't wear masks. White people attack me for not wearing a mask currently. Well, I mean, they don't, because I'm me and I'm aggressive. But if they were, I understand they are doing it because they're trying to be good, and they're trying to be a hero. They believe the lie because they're naive, and they're like, but to be good, you have to do this. If you're not doing this, you're not good. So it's a combination of them trying to be good and heroic, because they're legitimately trying to save people, but they're naive enough to not look into stuff, look into the information actually presented. They're just repeating what Bob, the media guy, said, or Joe, the other media guy, stammered.
Well, it's one of those things that I actually have been very critical of in the, I guess you could call it the pagan sphere, the ethnic faith sphere. People that come into it, they're very naive. They're very trusting. It's even a tagline in paganism. Our word is our bond. The amount of people that have told me that and then reneged is ludicrous. But the basic thing is, people come into the pagan sphere and they're looking for home. And what do they get? They get Hinduism. They get Christianity 2.0. They get all sorts of nonsense. I did a whole frickin' series of videos on them.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah. But when I first got into paganism, just as an example as to how naive I was when I first came into this, someone told me that this was hilarious, because the person who told me this, I think, had a shaved head. Told me our ancestors, the males, had long hair, and it was Christian to have short hair. So I started growing my hair out. I hated it. I hated every freaking second of it. And then, what should I find when looking in lore? But long.
credit for making you question it.
Yes, but in the lore, for some tribes, having long hair was a punishment. It was indicative of how lowly you were.
Same as shaving.
Same as shaving your beard. It was a sign of shame. Like, people talk about how there's nothing really saying about talking about beards too much in, like, pagan stuff. It's because if that's the default, it doesn't need to be.
Right, like you don't have to have a beard, but what is talked about, it isn't talked about you have to have a beard in paganism. This is true. What is talked about, though, if you dig around in the history, not so much in the lore, is that the shaving of the beard was a punishment. What? Okay, now, stop and think about this. It doesn't say that you have to have a beard, but shaving a man's beard was a punishment. So what is then expected of the pagan male? Well, to have the beard, because otherwise you can't shave it off.
And again, not a requirement, but when you're in a situation where you just don't understand why anyone would do that. But it's one of those things that has gone around. Like, everyone who's like, oh, you got to have long hair if you're a pagan. No, there's no evidence of that whatsoever.
Right. Well, and I just want to cover this, too, is the having the beard thing. If you're a youth, you're not expected to have a beard because you can't grow one yet. And another neat little tidbit, mustaches were once considered part of the beard. And you can see it, I guess, in some of the old artwork where the beard and mustache actually grew together and then they'd shave other parts of it. The mustache was actually considered part of the beard, and it was commented on some of the, in particular, the Celtic tribes about how womanish they were because they'd shave the beard but leave the mustache. So, yeah. But it was also commented on how the Celts were really obsessed with their beards and would grow them out to points or into the double point. So, like the devil beards.
Well, and you can actually explain that by, when you go to war, you don't want to go clean shaven, so you shave everything but the mustache, and that's why you end up with these really long, like almost like the modern handlebar horseshoe mustache or whatever it's called. But it's the Gaullist mustaches.
Yeah.
And it's all these little things. Because here's the thing, is the more I study, the more it's very obvious. Paganism did not die out. It didn't die out remotely during Christianity and all that. What happened was a very slow contaminating and twisting and oppressing of it. When there are freaking peasants who are still venerating pagan gods to spite the church, yeah, I don't think it took as hard as people think it did.
Or Christians that never heard of Christ.
Christians that never heard of Christ. Or one of my favorites is when the church didn't have its fingers in something long enough, they would start what I will refer to as repaganifying, which is where they've been stripped of their ethnic stories, but they still have the Christian stories, but they're not written down. So they have just what they've heard. So it enters the folklore, fuses with the already pagan elements, and presto, there's actual like heretical sects that end up with like Lucifer is the good guy and like God is the bad guy. It's a whole thing. You can take the pagan you can take the Hyperborean out of Hyperborean ethnic faith, but you can't take the ethnic faith out of the Hyperborean.
Well, and for anybody interested in the American part of the story, since this was brought up a little bit earlier, is the American churches were crying out for money and even appealed to the Roman Catholic Church for money so that they could go out west, because the pioneers were going out west and returning to heathenism. Today we're told, well, that means that they was going out and they was joining Indian tribes. No, that's not at all what they meant. If you can get a hold of these actual the actual diaries, which are written in English, what it was is the people was going out there and just leaving Oily Josh behind, and returning actually to to our biosphere is notorious amongst mountain men. But even families on like the Little House on the Prairie, yeah, most of them was actually returning to their biospirit because they left the church behind. And in some cases, the preachers would show up and the people would run, at the least run the priest out of the town, if not straight up hang him.
Well, like you have, what are they? The Undertaker, which was basically a death god in the Old West. Not like a literal Undertaker, but you know what I mean. And you had Lady Death and the Grim Reaper, and you have all these spirits and creatures and gods and all these things that show up.
Appalachian gospel.
Oh, yeah. So, fun fact for anyone that hasn't heard like an original rendition, but if you actually listen to the lyrics of Ain't No Grave, the Appalachian folk song, it's challenging Jesus to a fight.
You're going to have to follow me to hell and beat me in a fight to make me go to heaven.
Yes. Why? Because frick you, Jesus, that's why. I mean, Americans are not known for our love of the church because there's...
And it's a really popular Christian song.
Yeah, like Oh Death. Oh Death is not a Christian song.
Even though it's a Christian song. It's gospel.
Yeah, but...
They love it in the churches, but if you listen to the lyrics...
Yeah. Well, and it's even based on old folklore because there's old folklore about stuff like that. But it's one of the reasons I get really irritated when people are like, "Oh, America, it's just this Christian country." No, it's not. Don't let them lie to you.
Right.
And I'm not even talking about like
Biologically, we're not different
from Europeans. No.
from the Europeans, because people see both of us, and people will see me and they'll claim me to, and I know that I'm Celtic. Both sides of my family.
I'm only second generation in America. Both sides of my family from Ireland. For at least back to like the 4th century is the oldest members that I can find in Ireland. But there's people that came from other areas as well in my lineage, other areas of Europe. But I've had people tell me, yes, you look like my cousin or my uncle that lives just down the road. From Ireland, from Scotland, from England, from Norway, from parts of Sweden. And I guess it's because I'm a dirty blonde. I don't know. Apparently I look a little bit Slavic. I've been told that I look Greek. Yes, we all look so very, very different.
Well, it's like apparently I look like a Bulgarian culture hero. I've also had people say that I look Spanish, North Italian, German, and I am German American. Yeah, the list goes on. People have tried to claim me for Slavic, Celtic. It's just a thing.
We don't look as different as people think that we look. We really don't. Well, Swedes are all tall. Well, let me introduce you to my 5'4" Swedish friend.
Yes.
They're not all giant tall. They're not all midgets either.
Well, that's like Iceland. A substantial amount of the genetic stock of Iceland is Celtic. Because they had the entire, basically, lower class, by and large, was Celtic. And this whole, the gods require to be on the sacred land of Europe or something. This is nonsense.
The gods follow us.
The gods follow us. I mean, it's even in the lore. Like, there's bits from Vinland. Like the stories from Vinland. You know, the brief time, brief, quote unquote, time we were here. Where the Finnish, they're straight up honoring Thor, and he answers. I mean, this whole thing of, it has to be in Europe. Hyperborea is the north period. We've said it before, any temperate forest, any boreal forest, anyone who lives there that isn't us, they're just keeping our seat warm. It's ours and they don't know it.
But yeah, we've been rolling for an hour and a half of actually talk time. So yeah, I'm going to cut out of here. You can keep going if you want, but I'm going to cut out of here. But yeah, I'm going to remind everybody, question things, think about them rationally and logically. Experts, they do have their place, but actually look into the things that they have to say. And then aside from that, I'm going to just say don't be safe and don't be quiet and do keep your powder dry because the shitstorm's coming.
And I will simply say to everyone who showed up, thank you for showing up, and I hope you enjoyed what effectively just turned into us ranting about things that annoy us.
And self-editing.
And self-editing on the fly. But for everyone that's returning to ethnic faith, welcome, be great, be strong, and look to the old ways. And please, for the love of the gods, stop taking the idiots in suits seriously as if they are speaking gospel. The amount of things people get wrong is high. That's why every generation is supposed to basically double check and scrutinize the generation's discoveries before. That's how science moves forward. That's how literature moves forward. That's how art moves forward. And it doesn't always go in the right direction, but at the very least, they're actually poking the stuff that came before so that it makes sense, so that they make sure that they're not following nonsense. And I don't really care which of our ancestral gods you're venerating, but make sure that they're ours, and from personal experience, I will say the ones closest to my ancestors, the ones that I know, or it's pretty obvious they were in that area, they mean more to me. I'm not going to vilify someone for honoring a god that doesn't appeal to me. There's thousands of them, and I only really do like 10. So I'm not really less than that overall. So be strong, because you don't honor the gods with candles and crystals and all this stuff. You honor them by being the very best you can be. You honor them by living up to their expectations as best you can. Now, go out there, be great, and be a absolutely amazing example for the Hyperboreans.